So I wanted to share a little bit of my backstory before I share the full testimony. I've always struggled with anxiety, which is ironic standing up here. Even before I knew what anxiety was, like as a kid, I had all these things and I was like, oh, I don't want to do that, and all this anxious feelings. And I was like, that's normal. I thought it was normal that everyone plays out every single scenario that you can in your head for what could happen, or all the variety of other crazy things that I would be like, oh no, Spencer's gonna not come home and get in a car accident and die. Like all of these things I would think of, and I know realistically that those things aren't true, but that didn't stop me from having those thoughts. I think my anxiety really hit its peak during the pandemic. My daughter McKenna was only 7 weeks old when the world shut down. So I was a new mama, trying to figure out how to be a mama, worrying about the lack of formula, worrying about all the other things happening. And it really put me over the edge. And that was on top of having postpartum depression. So I was just feeling really overwhelmed. And so I went into therapy, and my therapist suggested that I start taking medicine. And so I did at that time, because I believed what it was best for me in that season. But I continued to struggle with anxiety and depression, even on the medication, because it wasn't a fix-all solution. It was a Band-Aid, and it was temporary. So I decided to stop taking the medicine in September of 2020. I was off it for almost a year and a half. And then we had Ezra, and when we lost him, I went back on the medicine because that was a really difficult time. But this time, instead of still feeling everything, I felt nothing. I was completely numb, and I did not want to be that shell of a person. So I continued to work through my grief of losing my son by sharing my journey to motherhood, and this really helped a lot. And so in April of this year, I stopped taking my anxiety medicine altogether. And I still had the moments where I had really bad anxiety, and it was really bad. Towards the end of the school year, I had like a really bad weekend, and it was really rough. I think the worst it has ever been. And one Sunday, Brandon had an altar call. So I took that faith step and came to the altar. And Pastor Brandon didn't know what I was praying for. I didn't whisper in his ear. He just prayed in agreement with me for whatever I was bringing to the altar. And after I left the altar, I felt a peace like I've never felt before. I never really pieced it together until recently. I was like, whoa, that doesn't give me anxiety anymore. And it's, thoughts and feelings that felt like yelling in my head now are barely a whisper. And I know that when I do have those anxious thoughts, instead of allowing them to turn over and over in my head and spiral out of control, that I can turn to God. I am able to recognize that my thoughts are unrealistic and very unlikely to happen. I acknowledge that God is with me, that He cares for me, and that He is listening, even to the unrealistic thoughts and feelings. He doesn't care how silly or stupid my thoughts are or my feelings are. He wants to hear it all. By turning my focus, prayers, and eyes to Jesus, it takes my mind off the situation and puts them on the Savior. From my overwhelming problems to His overwhelming love.